Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and today we gotta talk about Emma Vigeland's appearance on Piers Morgan because she was absolutely horrible in every possible way, incredibly rude, and it was embarrassing, and yet many on the far left are praising this appearance, which is exactly why they have no pull with the general public, exactly why people don't listen to them or why they rejected them electorally, and I find this to be absolutely hilarious. Now, we're gonna get into this, but before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?
Sarah McBride replied by saying this is a blatant attempt from far right-wing extremists to distract from the fact they have no real solutions to what Americans are facing. To which I say, well, I'm not even vaguely right, and I think it's wrong that biological men who've become trans women should be in women's spaces.
You're not vaguely right, Piers?
No, I'm
I
actually.
just listened to a segment
I would say I'm in
where
the
you
center.
agreed with Glenn Beck,
no, I would say
that
yeah,
right commentators
exactly,
in the country
but
repeatedly.
but
but
rather
apparently
like,
something's happening
hang on,
because
I haven't finished
Bill
yet.
Maher and someone you saw on TikTok.
I haven't finished yet. Let me ask you a question.
Being hysterical. Go ahead.
Let me ask a question.
So right off the top, I want to point out what the strategy is going in for Emma Vigeland, because she said this post her appearance on The Culture War, which is a podcast that I was actually on with her, and that is to never be invited back, to be such a lefty progressive, such a defender of your ideological beliefs that you are not invited on the program because you're such a big girl fighter. But in reality, in actuality, all she's doing right here is being rude. Now, I know Emma Vigeland is the kind of person who has a mug on her desk at her office that says polite women never make history, and she's very proud of that. She internalizes that message because oftentimes when you grow up incredibly privileged like Emma Vigeland did, going to an elementary school that costs $40,000 a year due to the fact that your parents are U.S. attorneys / corporate attorneys, you end up deciding to invent struggles to fight against, and this is exactly what is on display here. But this gets into a territory that is so dumb and so embarrassing as we progress through this that it is just pure comedy. It's honestly one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen in my entire life, and I don't feel all that well going through the course of this video, but we're gonna power through because I want you guys to see it through to the end.
Yeah, go ahead.
I do not identify, and I know you believe a lot in self-identity, I do not identify as conservative
I don't know what that means.
I'm like Bill Maher. I'm just completely bemused by the woke left and how nuts you've all got, right? And I think this
Bill
election...
Maher's an old, rich libertarian who's bitter at the world. I mean...
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Right? Here's my question. If I, as a man who identifies as a liberal, if I can see why it's so wrong for biological men who have now become trans women to be in women's spaces, to be in women's sport, to be everywhere in women's lives where they historically were not biological men supposed to be, why are you not as exercised by this as a woman? I don't get it.
So right here, Piers Morgan asked her a straight up question, a question that should not be confusing to anybody out there in the world, which is, why is it acceptable for biological men to compete with women in their sports, especially when you consider the fact that female sports are designed not to maximize competition as male sports are. They're designed specifically to have a carve out for women that limits competition to biological women.
You're all about women's rights.
First of all, absolutely. I host a sports podcast. I care deeply about sports, and I believe that anybody that identifies as a woman should be able to participate in the sport as long as it abides by the particular bylines or guidelines.
You know it's wrong. You know it's unfair.
Said sports league.
And Emma responds by saying she hosts a sports podcast and she cares deeply about sports ball. But let's be honest, based on her takes on sports as an issue, this is somebody who knows absolutely nothing about the topic. It is actually embarrassing the points that Emma brings to the table on this particular issue. And again, I don't know why, it just feels so bizarre.
But actually, we're talking here about Nancy Mace, who loves a camera in her face and loves attention wherever she can get it. You know, I find it pretty disgusting that she is basically implying that this trans lawmaker, just by being in her presence in the bathroom, may rape her. I do choose to speak up for women's rights. I believe that I do so on my program, The Majority Report, regularly. And I'm disgusted that Nancy Mace has decided essentially to support Donald Trump wholeheartedly, who has been found liable of sexual abuse in court, and multiple of his cabinet appointments, picks, including Pete Hegseth and Matt Gaetz, have been credibly accused of sexual assault themselves. So
a couple of things that I just want to straighten out for you guys out there in the audience. The issue of bathrooms is something that I do not give a damn about. And the reason why I don't give a damn about bathrooms is because when there is a big ass line for the female bathroom, it is very often the case that women will end up using the men's room. There are plenty of gender neutral bathrooms. This is no big deal to me at all whatsoever. That being said, Emma tries to pivot this to talking about how certain people in the Trump administration have been credibly accused of sexual assault or sexual misconduct. And what I will point out is that they try to push this on Matt Gaetz on The View, and Sunny Hostin had to read an embarrassing legal note because what ultimately ended up happening in that particular case is that the DOJ investigated it and they found no grounds for criminal charges. And this idea of somebody being credibly accused is non-existent. Either you are guilty of the crime, either it's been proven out, or it's not. Credibly accused is just a way to attach more legitimacy to an allegation rather than actually go through the adjudication process. They've been accused, period. Point blank. If you want to talk about the specifics of the evidence, feel free to bring that up. But as of right now, none of the people that she talks about have been convicted. And again, they have just been accused.
So apparently it's triggering for her because some
when you
of
say
the
credibly
genitalia may be
accused,
slightly different
all
in the
of them,
stall next
when you say
to
credibly
her.
accused,
Well, but it
the
doesn't
last two
matter
names
to
you
her
mentioned
that
have-
Trump
the
has
last
been
two-
found
Okay,
liable
you
of
can't just keep
sexual
talking.
assault in
All right.
court.
Emma,
Piers.
time out.
Piers.
Time out.
Has Trump been found
Time-
liable of sexual
time
assault
out.
in court with
Trump
Eugene
was
Carroll?
found guilty in a civil action. He denied it, as you know.
Found
and in case of
liable, exactly.
and the case of
Okay.
Gates and Pete
So
Hesketh,
the
they have
preponderance of
cata-
evidence went
you
in
can't
her
just keep
direction.
talking.
And he's
Time out.
she's been
All right, keep
and
talking.
he has been accused
Let
by
me know when you
dozens of
finish.
women.
Let
There
me
you
know
go.
when are you finished?
I'm done.
Okay.
I'm done.
When we have a
There you
debate, the customary for the host leads it, and you respond to questions, okay? If I may be so bold.
So again, Piers tries to respond to the credibly accused nonsense, and Emma uses the tactic of being rude and talking over people. Again, cite the mug on her desk that says, "Polite women never make history," which is something that Emma tries to live her life by, even though, again, she is completely irrelevant and ridiculous. But she brings up the Trump case where he was found liable for sexual abuse, which is what they ended up doing with that E. Jean Carroll case. And I will point out that people are very skeptical of that. That case was brought in 20 years later. That was in a civil court, and it is currently being adjudicated on appeal at this moment in time. That being said, if you want to throw that out there, I say that's fair game, especially again when you have Nancy Mace making this issue about bathrooms rather than something that is far more winnable for the Republican Party, for the right wing, and for the American culture overall.
Okay.
I'm done.
When we have a
There
debate,
you go.
the customary for the host leads it, and you respond to questions, okay? If I may be so bold.
Now again, what Piers doesn't realize is going on right here is that Emma Vigeland is intentionally trying to be rude, intentionally trying to talk over him, because she thinks that this makes her look reasonable if she just keeps spitting out her talking points and never actually addresses the issue. But remember, Emma has a sports ball podcast, so she definitely knows a lot about sports ball. She's very smart on the topic of sports ball, so we're gonna get to her sports ball takes very soon.
The point is that Hesketh and Gates have categorically denied any wrongdoing, and none has been proven against them. In Trump's case, it was a civil action, as you know, not a criminal action. The criminal case against him was shuffling paperwork over an alleged one-night stand with a porn star. So it's not quite how you categorized it. Deborah Lee, let me bring you
Has
in here.
this trans lawmaker been accused of rape? Has this trans lawmaker
No,
who
but
she's
actually,
barring
if
from
you
the
are a
bathroom been accused of
congresswoman-
rape?
I also want to point out that you can see Emma's dumb face as Piers Morgan tries to correct the record, and I find this to be amusing. And again, she ends up deciding that she's going to jump in and say, "Oh, what about this trans lawmaker? Has she been accused of sexual assault or anything like that?" No, but we're still doing the bathroom policy. Oh my God, how dare we? How dare we have spaces for women versus men? Again, I'm somebody who points out that the idea of the whole bathroom situation is not the hill that I would die on. It's not all that important. Again, people go into bathrooms where men and women can go all the time. I understand that the fight should be in the sports arena. It should be in the locker rooms and other places that are more intimate and private for women, but this is what they decided to harp on, and Emma is very embarrassingly failing to even argue this point. So honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if the takeaway from the audience was, yeah, we should restrict the bagnos in this particular case.
If you're a congresswoman who survived sexual assault, you should be entitled to feel safe in the
So
restroom.
the presence of a trans woman in the bathroom. Oh gosh, you know, here in New York, there are a lot of multi-gender bathrooms, and I've gone to the bathroom next to a man. Oh my goodness, it was so fearful. What was I going to do with the rest of my life? I mean,
if I found you lurking next to me.
So Emma decides that she's going to go into mocking the whole situation, saying, "Oh, well, I've gone to the bathroom next to a man. What am I going to do with the rest of my life?" And I will just point out that Emma Vigeland's position on crime is that if you get assaulted on the train, then you should just move to another seat and let the person go, as she laid out in a video that I've played multiple times on this channel.
I was hit at one point sitting on the subway by a man who was having a mental health episode. He sat next to me and he was elbowing and kind of flailing around and hit me in the face and in my body. And it was jarring, right? The idea that I would want him to be hurt in any way, I just didn't want to be near him in that moment because I understood something was going on here. Every one of us who's taken public transit has had this kind of situation, something similar happen, seeing someone struggling. That doesn't mean that our fear in that instance, and I was a little scared because I was hit.
It's a problem. Like, it's people that need help.
But like, my fear is not the primary object of like what we should be focusing on right now. It's the fact that this person is in pain. And so, like, the politics of dehumanization privileges the bourgeois kind of concern of people's like immediate discomfort in this narrow instance, as opposed to larger humanity and life. It's really freaking twisted.
Yeah,
So even if somebody was assaulted in a bathroom, Emma Vigeland wouldn't give a damn about it because she had to protect the innocent baby angel criminal who's just trying to feed his starving family by attacking a woman in the bathroom stall.
Found you lurking next to me in a men's restroom, I'd feel fearful. Deborah Lee, let me bring you in here. I just think
that is a ridiculous accusation, Piers.
I didn't make an accusation. It was a statement of fact. I would feel fearful.
You would feel uncomfortable? Why would you feel uncomfortable?
If you were lurking around me in a men's urinal, damn right I'd feel uncomfortable.
Lurking? Who's lurking?
Well, what else would you be doing there?
Is this lawmaker lurking?
What else would you be doing there?
Going to the restroom.
I don't want you going to my restroom. Stick in your own restroom. For my safety, never mind yours.
Okay. So right here, this exchange actually made me laugh because Piers said if she was lurking in the bathroom where he was at, he would definitely feel uncomfortable. And Emma doesn't quite understand hypotheticals, that this is something that the left seems deliberately obtuse about, or they could just be dumb about. And she's like, oh, where's this trans lady lurking? I'm so confused. Even though clearly and obviously this is half a joke from Piers Morgan, and again, a hypothetical about her. She's like, who's lurking? In this scenario, Emma, let me explain to you the hypothetical that Piers laid out. You would be lurking. You, Emma Vigeland. That's what, if you were lurking in the bathroom next to me in a urinal, I would feel uncomfortable. That's what that means. It means you in the hypothetical.
But would a man be lurking? Would a biological man, is he lurking next to you?
That's the whole point.
Why is there something inherently perverted about going to the bathroom? You right-wingers, and yes, I'm including you in this with this classical liberal BS, are so bad faith. It's incredible. You are linking sexual abuse and sexual assault to trans people inherently, and that is a bigoted statement.
I want trans people to have, I want them to have fairness and equality like the rest of us, just not where it erodes women's rights.
So just when you thought irony couldn't get any more irony, Emma Vigeland calls Piers Morgan and right-wingers bad faith for linking transes to sexual assault inherently. Again, this is their code word when you talk about a particular issue. They're like, are you saying it's inherent? Are you saying it's biological? This is something that she tried doing to me when we were discussing crime on the Culture War podcast, and this is a bad faith debate tactic, ironically being utilized while she's referring to Piers Morgan as being bad faith.
But Deborah Lee, you've been listening to this patiently.
But separate but equal.
Emma,
separate but equal.
We're four people
Piers?
on the panel.
I would like to respond to this.
Deborah, your response.
Hey!
Separate but equal. Again, these people are mentally deranged in every possible way. There are far more differences biologically between men and women than there are between different racial groups. And by the way, I will also point out that if black people want to have a black student union, an Asian association, a Latin association, or whatever at a university, Emma Vigeland would be totally in favor of that. She would not come down against a black student council, even though that is a separate institution for black people, and she would also demand that they have equal funding to the regular student council.
One thing I'll just get a little emotional about is it does, as a woman, feel pretty I feel like the humanity of women and their rights.
But yeah, I mean, the white woman fake crying thing, I could do it too, but and then you just turn it off.
No one cares. And even in the face of Trump and everything that he represented, that's a tough pill to swallow.
So the idea that Emma Vigeland, who advocates for separate but equal institutions and clubs and whatnot for minorities, is somehow going to be against this conceptually is ridiculous. And if she does have one objection to this concept, it's the idea that the minority group isn't privileged enough over the white group or the male group, or whatever oppression hierarchy she seems to be fighting against.
As somebody who grew up as an athlete, I would have been terrified if there was a man in my sports, in my leagues, playing against me. My own brother, who's 2 years older than me, anytime we would play basketball against each other, he would knock me down. And you say that you speak up for women's rights, but have you heard about the case in Virginia where a man put on a skirt, even though he went with male pronouns, and went into the bathroom and sexually assaulted a 15-year-old girl, and now the parents are suing the school because they tried covering it up. You want to protect women? We're not saying that every single trans person has violent tendencies, but it's opening this up that any single person, if there's no checks on this, any man can put on a skirt, say, I'm a woman, and go into the bathroom, and it's paving the way to make it easier for predators to attack women. And I don't know why you're so offended that women want to be able to use the bathroom without men in their presence. That is something that is totally normal and fair to ask.
I just find it amazing, honestly.
So here you have this woman on the right, and she ends up bringing up individual cases. Emma Vigeland says, oh, there's no examples, and then when you bring up examples, those are anecdotes. And need I remind you, one of my most popular response videos to Emma Vigeland is the case involving the nurse that they called Bike Karen, that Emma Vigeland actually believed as a 36-year-old pregnant woman getting off her shift as a physician's assistant, walked up to a group of 4 black kids and stole a bike from them. And she called that person a racist and all of that, even though that, of course, proved to be wholly untrue. It turned out the black kids forced her bike into the terminal in order to take it from her because they were squatting on the bikes in order to avoid paying for it. But Emma Vigeland decided to call that person a racist, even though, if true, that would be the first time in history a white 36-year-old pregnant woman stole a bike from black teenagers.
I mean, I ride city bikes, which is clearly what they're using there, and it's not that hard to figure out. If you're doing it on the app, it'll say which bike and which. It'll have a label at the docking station for which bike she's in reference, or they're both referencing. So honestly, it should have been pretty clear to her, but she's in work clothes. So my first thought was, is she drunk? Like, is she, I don't know, but she just seemed really out of it. And she's straight up racist, totally. But there was like, she wasn't really making a ton of sense, which was bizarre. And they were like, this is my bike. Just go to the other bike stand, the little docking station, and get your own. It's not that difficult, but
it's never happened in the history of this country. It's never happened in the history of the world. Yet Emma Vigeland went off on that anecdote and said that this woman was racist, defamed her, all this crazy stuff. So let us be clear, she is no stranger to the anecdotal example, and the ones that were brought up are way more common than the imaginary one that she went after in that video. Again, imagine the mug right in front of Emma that she's looking at that says, polite women rarely make history.
So the United Nations 2 weeks ago had a report that said just under 900 medals have been won by trans athletes in women's sport, thus depriving biological actual women from winning medals because they are literally not as strong, not as powerful, do not have the endurance of the trans women athletes because they have male physiology. How can that be right?
Absolutely.
900 medals.
So Piers.
Yes. Explain to me.
First of all,
why don't you care?
First of all, why don't I care about that? One is the fact that this should be determined by those specific bodies. It's not at the top of my priority list.
Some are male, some are female. That's why we separated in the Olympics.
That women are bleeding out in parking lots. That trans youth are committing suicide at extremely high rates because of this exact kind of rhetoric, where you otherwise the gender identity of their choice.
So Piers asked her a very straightforward question about biological males participating in female sports. Remember, Emma Vigeland cares so hard about sports that she runs a sports podcast guest. That's how much she knows about it. But she says, it's not at the top of my priority list. I care about all these other fringe things, and not to mention the transes with their suicide. So if you don't let boys beat up your girls in sports ball, then they're going to kill themselves, which basically makes you a murderer for not supporting it.
You mean standing up for women's rights?
Available to all of these kids, if trans care was available to these kids, they would develop in the exact same way, where none of this would even matter. And so back to what was being said before about these assaults on other people. Back to what was being said before about assaults on these people.
Now, again, Emma, falling off a cliff right here, decides to advocate for transing the children's. Yes, she is in favor of that. Yes, this is incredibly stupid and ridiculous, but are we surprised that this is what is coming out of her mouth right now?
That's wrong too.
Yes, it is.
Right. So how many?
But you know what you never hear, Emma. You know you never hear. You never hear.
Not about this
Emma. You never hear about a trans man having an unfair advantage in male sport. Why is that? How come we never hear about that?
There are trans men because
you know why?
Amplify
you know why? Because they don't
it's
win.
A moral panic,
they don't
just
win
like it was
because they have inferior physiology.
School, just like it was about how seductive.
We don't hear about it because it's not an issue. Because they can't win.
So again, the reason we never hear about female to male transes dominating male sports is because they don't exist. Just like the movement for females to go to male prisons is non-existent in the United States of America. Obviously, there is a great biological advantage the one way in both of those scenarios, which is why biological males want to go into female sports and want to go into female prisons. And honestly, if I was ever arrested and going to be sent to prison, I for damn sure would prefer a female prison to a male prison, because you'd be an absolutely idiotic moron to not prefer that.
No,
let me bring in Luke.
Because these are issues that are titillating to white liberals or
titillating.
White,
How weird you would say titillating.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So here we go with Emma attacking white people. Oh my God, white people are so bad. Oh, they're so evil. They're so racist. Oh, they're so terrible. And it's titillating to them to talk about this conversation. And oh my God, what white people aren't white people the worst? Again, Emma, just shut up. Shut your stupid face, please.
What's ridiculous is that
for you, it clearly is. You're not focusing on the more systemic rape issue in our prisons and in our our facilities.
You haven't
in this
asked me
country.
about that.
But I just did. Why haven't you been talking about male rape and male
I think
prisons,
it's terrible.
Way
Shameful.
more likely to occur than a trans.
Luke, jump in.
Then dedicate more segments to it then. Dedicate more segments to it.
So this is yet another dumb tactic from the Majority Report that I'm quite familiar with, which is don't talk about the topic that you want to talk about on your show. Talk about the topics that I want you to talk about that we maybe discuss, probably not even, on our show, because we think that you need to basically bend to our will and exist only within the parameters of debate as laid out by Emma Vigeland. Again, Emma, you're a nobody. You're nothing. You are a rich little bratty kid who went super woke progressive, and nobody is surprised by that. You are a cliche on top of a cliche, and no, you don't get to dictate the parameters of a debate. You are a guest on Piers Morgan's show. You're bringing up your stupid talking points. You're flailing uncontrollably. You're embarrassing yourself. And the idea that the problem is people are allowed to discuss things that you're not good at arguing against is absurd. You're an embarrassment. Everybody can see it.
I'll take your advice on what segments we should be doing. We are the fastest growing YouTube channel in the world, so we're probably getting it about right. Luke.
So I like when people push back and get a little bit snappy with these woke idiots. Right there, Piers said, yeah, I'll take your advice. I mean, we're the fastest growing YouTube channel right now in this particular category, but I'm sure you guys over at the Majority Report have it right, and we should just let you have editorial control, Emma Vigeland, who's never earned anything in your entire life. Now look, I'm going to link this whole segment in its entirety in the description of this video if you guys want to check it out in its full context, but there's one more exchange that I want to highlight because I think it's absolutely hilarious.
You really are not familiar with how these things work.
No, Piers.
You have to let me ask a question.
Should Yao Ming have been banned from the NBA because he's too tall?
So I just want to say, this particular point right here may be perhaps one of the dumbest, one of the most ridiculous, one of the most idiotically stupid points anybody has ever made in the history of discussing sports. Should Yao Ming be banned from the NBA because he was too tall? Emma, what the hell are you even talking about? This makes no sense on any level, which I will explain to you in great detail. In fact, the only place where this makes sense is in like some kind of bizarre world. Like Scratch that. It doesn't make sense in Bizarro World either, you absolute dude. First and foremost, I need to make this 100% clear for everybody out there in the audience. The idea that height is an overwhelming advantage in the NBA is not true. If you look at the players, the numbers of people that are over 7'3" that have ever made an All-Star game, we're talking about less than a handful of people. If you look at career length, we're talking about around 10 years for those super tall players in the Yao Ming category. By the way, speaking of Yao Ming, never won a championship, suffered with injuries throughout his entire career, and the other example that Emma Vigeland made up is actually more proof that this person doesn't know anything about sports, that she's an absolute idiot from top to bottom, and her sports podcast isn't worth the toilet paper that it's printed on.
How these things work.
No, Piers.
You have to let me ask a question.
Should Yao Ming have been banned from the NBA because he's too tall? I mean, we've got to make it be fair in competition.
I tell you what's not fair. When you have a boxer in the women's.
So Emma also brought up Shaquille O'Neal in that particular conversation, and Shaquille O'Neal was a far more dominant player than Yao Ming, even though at his prime Yao Ming was a great player. But this is a stupid example for a number of reasons. In fact, both of these examples are mind-numbingly dumb from top to bottom. But let's talk about Shaquille O'Neal, because Emma's like, oh, should we change the rules based on the fact that Shaquille O'Neal is so tall or so heavy, as she said right there? And in reality, the answer to that question is no, but they did in fact change the rules in the NBA because Shaquille O'Neal was such a dominant force in the league. We actually have a hack-a-Shaq rule and a bunch of other rules that the competition committee ended up inserting into the league due to the fact that Shaquille O'Neal, at his size, at his quickness, at his level of dominance, needed to actually change the rules of the NBA in order for us to work out how the game was going to be played with him on the court. Ever hear of zone defense in the NBA? Well, guess what? That was illegal in the league up until the year 2002 when it was allowed, because only having players guard man-to-man and not allowing them to be more than 2 steps away from their defender was too damaging for the rest of the league when you had a player like Shaquille O'Neal on the court. So yes, they legalized a whole new level of defense because Shaq existed. Again, what a horrible example, embarrassingly so, from somebody who runs a sports ball podcast.
Tell you what's not fair. When you have a boxer in the women.
So to Emma Vigeland's question, yes, we do actually change rules when somebody is a game-breaking player, even in the male league. But in addition to that, this is kind of a moot point, because the way that the NBA game is played right now, the idea that you would have this classic dominant center, and while I think Shaq could still make it in the NBA, Yao Ming probably not, is just not true. It's not the case anymore. The NBA is a much smaller, much quicker, much more three-point dependent league, and this is based on the fact that you had Mike D'Antoni essentially insert his system into the league, and that system was perfected by Steve Kerr and the Golden State Warriors with Steph Curry, so now you don't even have true centers anymore. So this person who runs a sports podcast doesn't understand, while she's citing NBA examples, the biggest change in NBA gameplay in modern history, which is the removal of the classic center position that she is referring to as having an unfair advantage. And yes, maybe there does need to be some change by the competition committee in the NBA in order to tilt the game back in favor of the centers, since they're so useless in the modern NBA, unless of course they have a shooting game. But you know, Emma Vigeland wouldn't know that because she only owns a sports podcast. She only does a sports ball podcast. She's very into the sports ball. That's Emma Vigeland's position. She totally knows all about the sports ball. Trust her, guys. She's not a complete and total idiot on this topic in every possible way, because Emma Vigeland is a sports expert. Every time I think that people on the left can't get dumber, can't get more out of touch, can't get more ridiculous, they manage to impress me. They manage to wow me, and right here in this moment, this is Emma Vigeland. But even more crazy than her performance on Piers Morgan is the fact that other lefties are taking clips of this and saying, yeah, Emma totally dominated right there. Emma totally showed Piers Morgan because she talked about male sports ball league and she said Yao Ming too tall for NBA, therefore we can't do nothing related to changing or having any rules in sports ball. As if, again, in the NFL, the competition committee doesn't meet every year and revise rules in order to make the game more fair. As if we haven't seen rule changes based on great players in Major League Baseball. One of the things that is banned in Major League Baseball, and it's actually been heavily restricted, but before these new restrictions on pickoffs, was that the first baseman is no longer allowed to stand in foul territory in order to do pickoffs. And the reason why that was banned was because Keith Hernandez, the greatest defensive first baseman of all time, was standing in foul territory, and because he was a left-handed first baseman, he could essentially catch the ball at the point of the tag and get somebody out. That was considered too rigged in favor of the defensive prowess of Keith Hernandez and the pitchers that he worked with, so they restricted that ability in the league. Again, this happens all the time, and I will also point out that the point of male sports is completely different from the point of female sports. It is to maximize competition, period, point blank. If you're a girl and you can compete in male sports, we welcome you in there, but none of them can. While female sports is meant specifically and expressly to limit competition, to remove males from the competition, because spoiler alert, they would win. Emma doesn't seem to understand that because she has brain damage and she's too busy looking at that mug that even in Bizarro World is cringe that says, oh, polite women never make history. You're unimpressive in every way, Emma. Congratulations. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. If you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the objective nonsense streaming out of Emma Vigeland's face. Till next time.